The cameras were off, the lights dimmed, and the chatter of the press faded into the marble hallways of the Capitol. Senator John Kennedy sat alone in his office, his tie loosened, a half-empty coffee cup beside a pile of handwritten notes. Outside, the world saw him as sharp-witted, charming, and endlessly composed. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about politics or television soundbites. He was thinking about something far heavier: how to live up to his own name. It all began 3 months earlier, when a young intern named Clara joined his staff. She was bright-eyed, full of energy, and completely unafraid to challenge him, a quality that at first amused him but soon began to test his patience. Clara came from a small town in Louisiana, the same kind of place Kennedy himself had once walked through as a boy, where people worked hard, prayed harder, and rarely complained. She admired him deeply, but she also believed that the world had changed and that maybe, just maybe, Kennedy needed to change with it. "Senator," she said one afternoon after a committee meeting, "you're brilliant at holding people accountable, but have you ever thought about showing them your heart instead?" Kennedy raised an eyebrow. "Darlin', my heart's in everything I say. But if I start crying on the Senate floor, folks'll think I've lost my mind." She smiled softly. "Not crying, sir. Just connecting. People don't want perfect anymore. They want real." That night, her words echoed in his mind. Real. The truth was, he had built a career on intellect and wit, not emotion. But deep down, there was a part of him, a tired, private part, that wondered whether being real meant admitting how heavy leadership could sometimes feel. The following week, Kennedy visited his hometown in Louisiana for the first time in years. The local church still stood tall, the diner still smelled of biscuits and butter, and the same group of old men still sat outside swapping stories. But there was something new: a small community center named after his late father, who had passed away years earlier. Kennedy hadn't even known it existed. Inside, he found photos of his father teaching children how to read, organizing food drives, helping the poor. It was humbling. Here was a man who had never held office, yet whose quiet work had changed more lives than most politicians ever would. Kennedy realized that somewhere along the way, he'd been so focused on keeping up with Washington that he'd stopped keeping up with the man who had inspired him to serve in the first place. That night, he sat on the steps of his father's old porch, the crickets singing around him, and thought of Clara's words again. Maybe it was time to start showing the world not just what he stood against, but what he stood for. When he returned to Washington, he did something unexpected. Instead of delivering his usual fiery speeches, Kennedy began visiting schools, veterans' hospitals, and small businesses quietly, without cameras.